With Carlos, we are going to prepare his talk that he's going to deliver beginning of May.
1st of May,
so
yes.
A bit more than 10 weeks, 10, 12 weeks. The entire process will last 10 sessions. Actually, the whole process would be 13 sessions or 13 weeks, actually. But with Carlos, we did already a couple of sessions already. So we are a bit ahead. And in fact, now of all the sequence of activities, Carlos has already a theme, a subject that he wants to talk about. He also developed or has some kind of an idea of a call to action. That is something that we could go in deeper in this session. He definitely has a structure because we worked on it last time we met. And so now we would start to work on the content. But now I ask Carlos if you want to use this session to plan for the others or to work, as I said, on the content. Start working on the content.
Yeah, to be honest, I would go with your advice, Leonardo. You know better than me, so whatever you feel it's better, we can go with that.
Okay. So I think that the question for me is, you thought, obviously, we discussed in passing about the call to action.
Yes.
And so if you feel comfortable with the call to action, we can start building. Otherwise, we spend half an hour here on the call to action, but then we sort of move everything one week ahead.
Yeah.
I would go with content.
With the content. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, okay. So let me take the schedule, basically. And on the content, basically, this session, we are going to do a brain dump of what you could be talking about in the talk. Actually, you have already a very clear idea of what is the message that you want to deliver. Maybe we start from the message, and then we start thinking really what is the what are the words that you would use to express it, and it will be literally a brain dump on which you will be working for the next week till we meet again in a week time. How does it sound?
Sounds good to me. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So can you just repeat quickly what is your message? What message are you going to deliver through the talk?
Right. This is interesting because I think I would right now I would maybe struggle to differentiate the message and the call to action. Maybe can you share more about how you differentiate both of them so I understand a bit better?
Okay. Well, you tell me what you have in mind, and then we tag it with the right name.
Okay.
So we can work on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So from our last session, because I got it here as the main message / call to action. So that's why I get a bit confused. So the main message / call to action is get people to talk more intentionally about climate change with others, empowering them to inspire others using the framework of the climate funnel.
Okay.
That's the main message.
Okay. And actually, it's also the call to action because you say exactly what you want them to achieve. And in fact, last time we merged the two things together because the call to action was already embedded in your talk. But as a structure, to structure your talk, it might be different. It might be something different. So you have your message, you have your call to action, you have your structure. Now you have to put words to it. Okay?
Yeah.
So, as I said, between today and next week, you will need to write down basically a script for the talk that will be horrible. No worries. It will be really horrible. But you will start to put on paper or on electronic paper content. And today we start with that process, right?
Right. Yeah.
And we do basically three things. One, a brain dump. Two, we try to sort these ideas, these things in order. And then we see if this content supports the call to action.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would say, what shall we say, or what shall you say in the talk?
Okay. So just in terms of brain dump of
Brain dump,
all
yeah.
ideas.
Totally, yes.
Right. So obviously the climate funnel itself. So that's sort of like the main piece of content. So like show the actual graph of the funnel in there and explain it.
Yeah.
I would like to also talk about then, I guess, a lot of detail on the different stages of the funnel to try and make people understand like why is it important to differentiate where people are in that funnel. So it's not just looking at the funnel, but then going into a bit more detail and explaining what the different stages mean. That would be sort of the first part, like explaining each stage somehow. I mean, I know we mentioned last time that ideally we would sort of share all of this in a story so that people would come up with those ideas themselves and then just at the end give it to them. But just for me to understand, so explaining the different stages in the funnel, that's part of the content.
Okay, so
And
are you still with that structure? Are you still okay with that structure?
I think I quite like it. Yes, I mean, I think when it comes to writing the script of it, it might be challenging to come up to
Yeah.
do it in a way, but I'd like to try at least to do it
Okay.
that way. If for some reason I don't find the right stories or the right way to communicate that in that way, maybe we shift it. But I think I would like to try and do that because I think it can be a lot more powerful for the audience.
Yeah. And actually, we said already in the structure that we sort of run ahead of ourselves, but that's fine because you had this already with you. That not only content but also stories. Stories is the theme of next session, but
Yeah.
that's fine. If we know already that we want to incorporate stories, that's great. So if I remember correctly, it was stories for the 5 different steps. That could be the story of yourself or different stories that you happen to tell about different stages. And maybe the stories we're going to think about next time. But what would you like to say in each section, basically? In each of the, so would you like to say story plus kind of explanation, then story plus explanation, or list of like list sequence of stories, and then a kind of an explanation overall?
Yeah, I was thinking more of the latter. Yeah, a series of stories, and then at the end, just sort of recap with an explanation. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess that in that case, we can leave the stories for the next time, because when we know exactly what we want to explain, it will be clearer exactly what stories to use.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So let's imagine that we got already to the point where you told the stories. Now, what do you tell the audience? What do you tell them?
So yes, I guess at that point is when we bring the framework of the climate funnel, and then I would explain, as I mentioned, the different stages of the funnel, what each of them mean. And then we would go on to give them tips as to how to talk to different people in those stages. Like how can you adjust your communication style to all of those different stages so that it's more effective, that conversation. So you can, the ultimate goal is to inspire more people to move from one stage to the other, right? So we want to show the audience how can they tailor their message for each of those different stages.
Stage, yes. Okay, that's great. So for each stage, you kind of explain it and also use examples or use some kind of device to show them how they should engage with with people in that particular level of the funnel, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And this is some stuff that you can write. We
Yeah.
might write now, but probably we don't need to write it now because I assume it's pretty clear to you, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we are in a sense still working on the structure, but at the more atomic level, at the more like small lower level, which gets almost close to the content itself.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. And is there any explanation before you explain the 5 different steps? Explain. So after 5 stories and then 5 explanations, is there something that connects the 2 things, perhaps?
Good question. I think I haven't thought about that yet. I would guess ideally, like we would try to bring the audience through those stories and they would start realizing those final concepts themselves. So to get to a point where, there's kind of like a light bulb moment, they'll be like, oh, yeah, actually, I want to be talking to everyone in this funnel and not just at the people at the bottom. And then
Yeah.
it's when they sort of come to that realization, then is when I present the concept of the climate funnel and then I make it more visual and go through it in more detail. So I
Great.
guess it will be that moment when they sort of realize themselves about that. Yeah.
Yes. So we need to create the content for that particular moment,
Yeah.
right? So they heard 5 stories, they elaborated in their head, but it's not clear yet. And now they're getting closer to the light bulb moment. So you have the light bulb moment piece of content.
Yeah.
So and it's something I imagine, you saw this story of myself or 5 different people, whatever it will be, and you see how you also might have gone through the same or something like that. I don't know. What do you think? How do you see the interaction with the audience in that particular moment?
I think it could be something like, have you noticed how your how do you say this? How do your in a way like to make them realize that they've been thinking in the wrong way. So have you noticed how that's wrong or something like that made them think, oh yeah, I was wrong. Like, yeah, I should be focusing on every single stage, not just down there. So I guess some sort of question that challenges them to realize that they've been thinking probably in the wrong way before.
Yeah.
Something like, yeah, have you noticed with a final story, maybe it will be some sort of revelation of the value that can come after talking to people in different stages in a particular way. And they'll be like, have you noticed how talking to different people in different ways actually brings a lot more value to you as a person or your company or whatever it is, something like that, maybe?
Yeah. Yeah. So first they see you put a mirror to them and tell them, while I was telling these stories, you were thinking this guy is an idiot or something like that.
Yeah.
But now think the other way around and think you are there as well or something like that.
Yeah. Something like that. Yeah.
Right? Now, you say, think of how you could engage with these people differently for your company or for your, you said something about for your company or for your mission. Last time you mentioned that it might be interesting to put, to force them to realize that they were also in that situation. Do you remember it was two devices? It was like from outside saying, oh, I look at these people and first I think they are silly. Now I think that they are worth helping. But there was also another angle that was, oh, by the way, I was there as well.
Yeah.
Carlos was there. In fact, probably the story will be about yourself.
Yeah.
But also for them, you might have been in the same situation. You might have been the same kind of idiot as this guy.
Yeah.
So these are two different approaches that you might want to decide.
Combine, yeah, maybe.
Well, either combine, yeah, and it's up to you. Now we are kind of brainstorming. How could be one approach? How could be the other one?
Yeah, I think for that one to make them realize that they've been there, I think maybe after all of those stories, whether it's me or somebody else, just maybe try to interact with the public and ask them maybe a question, whether to ask them, maybe raise their hands, like something like, okay, can you raise your hands if you were born already taking actions about climate change? Or, if you always knew everything about climate change the way you know it now, something like that makes them tick, and they're like, oh yeah, actually I didn't, like, it was a process, it was a journey, it was me going through stages.
Yeah.
Maybe something like that, a question that sort of triggers that thought on them.
Yeah, and actually, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you bring them in the picture.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, how far should we go now in defining the exact words, or should we leave it basically to you to do it? Because we are talking about a lot of work now.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is work we have to do. I sent you a schedule, and actually, while I was writing, I was thinking, okay, this will be 10 sessions. Then I go, oh shit, I need 11 sessions. Oh no, I need 12 sessions. And actually, we need these sessions. We need this time, and session meaning weeks, basically. And
Yeah.
there are some weeks where, well, basically all weeks, there is a lot of work to do. And in this case, this week, the lot of work is to put these ideas that we mentioned now, to put them on paper,
Yeah.
right? And we are talking just about a tiny bit. Okay, I don't want to discourage you. Actually, it's quite the opposite. You are much farther than what normally people are after 2 or 3 sessions.
No,
So
that's good. That's good to know.
yeah, it's feasible. It's about, like, you cannot just wait for the next session,
Yeah.
like leave here and come in the next session and without having done anything. So definitely it's writing this stuff. And we have the block, the bridge between the examples, the stories, and the explanation of the stories. So we have this bridge. You will I will give you the link to watch again this video if you want, so you know that between like 10 and 20 minutes we talked about this, or you just remember. I think that it stays in the mind. But then what happens? Then you have these 5 explanations, 5 lessons learned, or something like that for each of the blocks. Now, how would you structure each one of these?
Right. So I think I will probably go first, explaining each of them. So giving an example of what they look like, and maybe linking back to the stories, right? So maybe remember what I mentioned before about this. So this was me at this point in the funnel. So I will go first with an explanation of each of them, so they get a good picture of what the climate funnel means, and then I would go on to share like those tips as to how do we tailor our messaging, our communication style for each of those stages, so that we can maximize the impact that we make on those people. Rather than explaining one and going through tips on that one, I think it's easier to explain all of them so they get a good picture of the whole funnel. And then we go back and stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and we tell them, oh, at this stage, these are the ways that we can try and get these people moved to the next stage. And yeah, and maybe some do's and don't, like you know, if you're talking to somebody that's outside of the climate funnel, maybe don't even mention climate change to them, because a lot of people that would put them off and won't come into the funnel. So at that stage, maybe just keep it very high level, talk about pollution or clean energy or things that are more relatable to people. So maybe
Nice.
doing some do's and don't for each of them. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. So actually now we have already 3 blocks. We have the bridge that we already finished, and we have you mentioned that you explain the whole funnel. In fact,
Yeah.
at that point, you are introducing the funnel.
Yeah.
They
Exactly. Yeah.
hear about the funnel, and it's and so there should be some way of introducing the funnel, telling them, look, you see there are different stages, and these different stages are part of what I call the whatever climate funnel or climate awareness funnel. How do you call it?
Yeah. Climate funnel. Yeah. Just keep it simple. Yeah.
And this is part of the climate funnel. And here is the climate funnel, and you show it, and
Yeah.
then you explain it in broad terms, and then you go into each one. So it's first they hear stories, then they go, oh gosh, that was me, or that could be me, and that could be my situation. I deal with these people, and then they go, there is a tool about this. There is a systematic view of looking at these things, and this is what Carlos came up with, and you're telling them, and look, this is a point where you are really explaining them. Look, this is how it works. Boom. And then you go into the more practicalities of how you deal with each level.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is this stuff like feasible? Do you need more kind of brainstorming to be able to write down the right stuff in the various blocks?
I think for that final part, I think I'm okay. I think it's the stories part that I would need more time to come up with those stories. And I think in a way I would probably need to know the stories so that I can, in the final part, link back to those stories. So yeah, so I think probably some of the next step is really coming up with those stories and seeing an outline of the stories, at least how what am I gonna say, which story, and what's it gonna be in it.
Yeah. Okay. So the structure here is made to be broken and changed, because, as I said, stories would be next session to give life to a otherwise like boring story, which is not your case. But sorry, boring, not story, but presentation, right?
Yeah.
But now we are already ahead in that, and we can start thinking of stories. So we use this session and the next one to think about content and think about stories. But
yeah,
I would like to push you, whatever stage, whatever like level of development we arrived today, to do write something down.
Yeah.
To do write an overall text of what it could be, script of what it could be. And I repeat, it will be horrible. No worries. Or maybe not, but just in case.
Yeah.
So before we jump to stories, to have the content to refer to when you explain the different levels, there is another part that we need to work about when we talk about content, which is after you explained the different activities to do in each of the do's and don'ts in each of the levels, how do you end? So there is a call to action, and there is a kind of an ending that should come after the call to action, like a positive, forward-looking ending. So we should also try to have a vague idea of that one, probably the CTA, the call to action, is already what you said. Like you push them. You should use this when you engage with other people, something like that, right? So
Yeah.
that's easy. And then we don't have to come up with it now. It's part of the homework. Is how do you close them, the story?
Yeah, so I think I probably have that already. So the goal is that, so the climate funnel, when I show it to them initially, it's like this. So it's very wide at the top because there's a lot of people outside or just aware, and very few people down here taking high impact action. And the end is that when we apply this approach of the climate funnel and start inspiring more people to come into the funnel, go through the stages, the end goal is that the funnel gets inverted. And that's when we have a lot of people taking high impact action, and then we create systemic change. So that's like the end. It's like through all of
Perfect.
this, we
Yeah.
create this inverted funnel, and that's where we want to be. And that's where we can end. Yeah.
Close. Yes. Perfect. Yeah. As you said it, you can just almost quote literally what you said, and it's
Yeah.
close. Okay. So perfect. Like we are halfway today. So we can think of the stories. So you have the 5 levels, 5 stories, and the 5 stories. I think we didn't decide yet whether you want 5 stories about you or 5 stories, 5 completely like separate stories.
Yeah, to be honest, that one I haven't figured out yet. I haven't put enough thought about that. I think on the one hand, I could maybe talk about an abstract sort of a random person, and then as we and just sort of make up the stories, would be like, taking it from different people, different experiences, but have like this sort of virtual person going through these stages, and kind of at the end sort of reveal, well, this person is you, or this person is me, and
Yeah.
I've gone through this, you've gone through this, we've all gone through this. So I think maybe that works. What do you think?
Okay. That could be a way of presenting it. My question would be, so how do you introduce? I'm going to talk to you about a guy, or I'm going to talk to you about, and it's generic. I personally am more. I would be more interested to hear your stories.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think it makes sense.
Listen stories about a guy that in the end, that guy is you.
Yeah.
Real stories that do you have real stories that you can picture yourself in situations at level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4? Maybe you could
Yes.
make up
Yeah.
this story
No,
in
no, I
some way.
believe, yeah, I think I've had either from me or from people I know. Yes, for sure. I have in all different stages. Yeah.
So you make it personal, and actually you are kind of already an authority in climate in sustainability, right?
Yeah.
So telling, look, even me, you don't want to push it too much, but even myself, I went through this. I was that kind of person,
Yeah.
and now I'm doing that much. Probably you don't want to or whatever. Maybe you want to overdo it and say, "Oh, look at me, how good I am." Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, not too much.
Exactly. It's not your style, I guess.
Uh,
But showing that real people, real good people went through that, and they weren't any worse for having gone through that because they didn't understand yet, or they didn't realize yet the magnitude of the issues or whatever it is.
yeah.
So I would say rather than making, then you can make up a story that reflects what who you are and what happened to you, even if you really weren't in that particular street and you didn't that particular thing at that particular moment, but it's something that you could have done. And
Yeah.
so I guess that now we could try and come up with with the stories. At least
Yeah.
a draft, una pincelada.
Ensalada.
Of the stories. What
Yeah,
is
so let me think. So for the unaware story, so that's when I'm outside of the climate funnel. So at that stage, so that's probably, when I was before the age of 24, 23, I was pretty unaware of all of this. So I could start by sharing who I was before. So for example, I used to love sports cars, and my whole obsession would be about sports cars. I didn't care about climate change. I cared about having a big exhaust in the car and making a lot of pollution and noise because that was cool. So I was very unaware of all of that. So I think that could be like the starting point, sharing, who I was before. And that's a very different person. Like I just, wouldn't care at all about climate, even if I had heard about climate change. So, even if there was a superficial level of awareness, but I would consider myself to be outside of that funnel because even if I had heard of it, but it was nothing to do with me. So
yes?
that could be a story. I'll sort of like expand on that, like how my life was then and how, I other people maybe communicated with me on that stage. Because even then, maybe when I was at uni, we would have people coming in and talking to us about sustainability and all of that stuff, and it just wasn't talking to me. So yeah,
That's interesting. So you have
yeah,
the story of you who like sports cars and big exhaust, how you call it, exhaust fumes
yeah,
and while having already sustainability talks that didn't make any difference to you.
mm,
Yeah, so that's a story. And remember the size of the stories that shouldn't be longer than probably 250 words per story.
okay. I'm gonna make a note of that.
Uh, that is probably 4 paragraphs, 4 long paragraphs, 4 or 5 paragraphs.
Okay,
Um, so this is one story. Nice. Then what's
yeah,
the next? Because maybe we can find a way to connect the stories across or
yeah,
one to the next.
yeah. So I'm thinking the aware one. So once I started really to be aware at a sort of a deeper level, I'm trying to think a good story there. So there's been a few things. So I went to the Western Sahara and I saw how people were living there and having water scarcity and all sorts of things. That really helped me open my eyes and started being. I think that's when I came into the funnel, and I was like, not only for the climate, but as a whole, improving the world somehow. So that's when I came into the funnel. I started building my awareness, like going to courses and reading books and things like that. Um, so I'm wondering how to put that in.
And
Um,
was there any particular episode in the Western Sahara experience that sparked this change?
I think it was just landing there, seeing how people were living there. Yeah, the whole concept of them just being 30 minutes away from where I was born and having such a different life. That was super revealing to me. That was like, I need to do something to improve the world somehow. Um, the only thing is that it's not 100% linked to climate change because back then that particular moment was a bit more about international development, those things, but still somehow related, right? But so I wonder whether that's a very relevant story in there or not, because that's really what brought me inside the funnel. More of like making the world a better place.
Okay. well, that would be a sustainability funnel rather than a climate change
Climate
funnel.
one, yeah.
But
'Cause I think for climate, it was a little bit later, probably. It was when I came to the UK and I started volunteering for, because the thing is, I think it's relevant, that story, because that's the one that brought me into, yeah, sustainability. And from there, and I think it might actually be a good one, because one of the things I'm passionate about is like how all of these things are interlinked and overlapped, right? And it's like sometimes, and that's part of the climate funnel, is that for people who are outside of the climate funnel or just on the top awareness stage, you might not talk about climate change with them. You might talk about affected communities. You might talk about pollution. You might talk about clean energy or the river flooding, and not directly climate change. And then so that opens up the doors for them to start increasing that interest.
yeah,
And then the next stage is when you have that motivation. That's when you start building specifically in climate change, and then you go on to take action. So yeah, I wonder whether, yeah, I think it might actually be a good idea to put that in, because it
so
opens up that, yeah,
yeah,
because it sort of brings up awareness of like the broader topics that are all interlinked, right? And I think also sharing and sort of dropping in there a bit of a side idea of like not just looking climate carbon like this, but we need to open up a little bit about all the interconnected issues.
totally.
So yeah, what do you think?
Yeah. So this is not related yet to the UK volunteering, right?
So
That
it
you
will be
mentioned.
just before, yes, just
Oh,
before.
yeah. Okay. Okay, that sounds good. And then the UK volunteering is the next step, or
Yeah, exactly. So the UK volunteering, that would be the next step. So that's when I came to the UK and I started learning a lot about the topics. And so that was 9 years ago, and doing some courses, reading stuff. And I started organizing events for the charity Engineers Without Borders. And that's where I started surrounding myself with other change makers. Before that point, I wouldn't be in those sort of environments. And at that point is when I started bringing these people together, surrounding myself with change makers. And then I actually started learning about climate change. And, thanks to international development, we were like, well, we don't want to run every single event about poverty. We want to be a bit more broad. So we started bringing in experts talking about renewable energy, climate change, and all those things. So I started being like, oh, well, actually, yeah, we have to do something about this, right? It's very important.
right?
So yeah,
And so, what's the name of the third step of third level?
uh, motivation.
Well, okay, so at that point, you started to get motivated
Yeah.
to do something. Okay. Okay, probably motivation came even before knowing of climate change as motivation to change the world or to make the world a better place after the experience in Western Sahara. But that's fine. That was your path. It doesn't have to be any different.
Yeah, I think this particular one would be motivation about climate change, like motivation about taking action for climate. Because then the next step is low impact action. So to build that low impact action, you need to build that motivation first. So I think that would be motivation specifically for climate action.
Yeah. Okay. And so the fourth story. So third story would be UK volunteering,
Yeah.
and fourth story about low impact action. What could it be?
Okay, so for low impact action, so there's quite a few stories. So I can share a bit like my journey in terms of you start thinking about what can I do as an individual. And then you start thinking, okay, so I can use my swap my toothbrush with a bamboo one. And then I started doing that. So I can share a few of the steps, a few of the low impact actions that I took from toothbrush to like using refillable shampoos and things like that, very low impact stuff. So that can be, and that actually spread over quite a few years. It took me a long time in that sort of lower impact action to then build to the higher impact one.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. That's something that you could tell. And actually, it might be interesting to have an idea of the time passing.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
spent 2 years in this level of awareness. I spent 23 years as unaware. I
Yeah.
spent 3 years or 2 years as aware. 3 years as motivate. 2 years as motivated to action. 5 years with low impact action. So it really shows how difficult it is to move
Mm.
along the funnel or down the funnel. And it takes time because first you think that replacing a bamboo brush, toothbrush is a great thing. I'm good. I'm done. That's it. And then it takes 5 years or 3, or I don't know what's your time scale,
Yeah.
to get to the point that, oh no, that's not enough. That's not enough. I have to do more.
Yeah.
And so step to the high impact action. So in high impact action, when would it be? When you started with good ripple for
Yeah. Yeah. So I think high impact would be, I would be mentioning mostly good ripple. So and maybe even a little bit before that. So I started joining movements. I think that's a big one. When you start joining movements, becoming part of an active society demanded that change. So that was just before starting Good Ripple. So I started joining things like Extinction Rebellion. I might not mention them. I'm not sure. Lots of people might have negative connotations for them. Yeah. But I started joining movements, being more active in my community, to inspire more people. And then I started Good Ripple as sort of, for me, that was like the culminant of my high impact action in life. It's creating this platform to bring everyone, because
yeah.
in the long term, that's the highest impact thing I can do as an individual, is empowering more people.
Oh,
And it's
yeah.
when I start thinking about joining, creating movements, creating a company, like shifting my work life to something impactful, inspiring others. So I started sharing content on LinkedIn so that I can spread that motivation, that inspiration, educating people. So again, through my content, I also became a climate change, climate fresk facilitator. So I'm running workshops to educate more people. So it's about that ripple effect, right? So it starts with joining movements, creating good ripple, and LinkedIn, and running climate fresh
Yeah.
workshops. So those are more like high impact. Even getting also active in politics. I would like to mention that one as well, because it's especially to try and inspire young people who are very inactive in politics. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, so you have all the stories, and they link to each other. I think much better than if they were separate stories.
Yeah,
Because,
no, now that we've gone through them, yes, I see the impact.
yeah, and actually, um, it's interesting how this connects to the way you start a talk, because you start a talk with some attention grabber
Hmm.
uh, and stories, and it could be a story, a 15-second story, could be a 2-minute story, but in this case I see that this could be a long story that you develop from when you enter on stage and you say something like, let me tell you the story of a guy who liked sports cars,
Hmm.
something like that.
Yeah.
Some attention grabber that people go, what's that? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know if talking about a guy who liked sports car is interesting. Maybe in that context might be interesting. Interesting as a kind of contradictory, right? We can think of that. Actually, this should be today and next time, to also think of that bit. But regardless, don't stress about it now. It's not particularly important issue right now.
You mean the intro,
The very
or
very first thing you say, right?
Yeah.
But the very first thing you say should be the introduction to this story, which builds up and creates interest in what's going on, why is he telling me this story, and where this guy end up, and then maybe at the last point you make it clear that it's you, and then you go to the bridge, as we said before,
Yeah.
right?
I'm
So
thinking even at that point, I could, at the beginning, maybe a good intro could be like, let me tell you a story of a guy who loved polluting loud exhausts. And then I could maybe put up a picture of me with the car, because I've got quite a few there. And it's like, so maybe to put a little bit of humor, because I'm going to be quite funny on that picture probably. So they start
well,
laughing by looking at me like 15 years younger with this sports car and whatever.
yeah,
Because as I said, like, I would like to add as much humor as possible. So yeah, I would like to come up with something that they start with a humor sort of sense in it.
okay. Definitely humor, yes. Engaging, creating something, what's going on, or something like now you were talking and it comes to mind. How would you like to have here on stage a guy who loves sports cars or loves sports cars and polluting the world or something like that? You know, some contrast say, I would kill him. I would like throw whatever
Yeah.
tomatoes at him. This is what you say in Italian, at least. You throw
Yeah.
tomatoes
Yeah, in
at
Spanish
the
too.
actors. Now, a question that we don't need to answer now, but we could keep in the back of our mind before we settle is, do you want to make it clear that all this story is about you, or do you want it to kind of reveal?
Yeah, so I think because of what you mentioned earlier, I think it might be better if I say that it's about me, because I think it resonates. It might create a deeper connection with people from the beginning, and also because otherwise it might just sound a bit too abstract, like this guy in the Western Sahara and then here and there. No, what do you think?
Okay. Yeah. Um, abstract. Well, abstract. Yeah. Well, yes. Kind of in the air might be interesting as a hook. If the story is interesting.
Yeah.
So it's like they always should have a question in their mind. What's going on here? What are we talking about? I'm curious. I want to learn more. Right. So this is
Yeah.
why I tend to prefer revealing in process rather than saying in advance, look, I'm going to talk to you about my story. You know, you don't say it like this, but
Yeah. Yeah.
presenting and introducing, I'm going to talk to you about the climate funnel. Obviously, no, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So this is something that we need to be aware, conscious of. And we can decide, you can decide to use it or not, but I'm giving you well, some kind of feedback, but it's my ideas in the end. I
Yeah.
don't,
Yeah.
you see in the structure of any movie, action movie or suspense, or maybe all the TV series, the Netflix whatever series, you see there is always something in the beginning that happens and that you don't understand, and you don't know even how it ends, and it makes you want to know more, right? So
Yeah. So
hmm,
I'm thinking. Wait, I'm just writing something so I don't forget because that's good. Okay, so I'm thinking maybe another strategy could be like, yes, so I don't say that it's me. I sort of reveal it at the end of the stories. And then at the end of the talk, just like as a closing thing, I can put up that picture of myself 20 years ago and say, remember, don't ignore the guy that loves the exhaust, because he could be changing the world in a few years.
5 years
Maybe, I
later.
don't know, something like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that
yeah.
it's, I don't
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
maybe.
Okay, so and I think, yeah, this is very interesting, because you see how stronger an intro with some controversial aspect is, rather than being polite and telling everything in advance. Now that you are talking, what if you tell them a story? Tell them, I'm going to tell you a story of a bad guy,
Hmm.
and you tell the story of a
Yeah.
bad guy, and then this bad guy slowly changes, and in the end, you have a good guy. And you see, and you tell them, look, the good guy is the same as the bad guy. How do you feel? How do you react to this? Right?
Yeah. I liked it. Yeah, I think that could work.
We need to try. We need to try to write it down and start not necessarily acting, but reading it and see how it sounds. This is why I'm pushing to have a draft as soon as possible. And that's why I
Yeah.
tell you, for next time, we need a first draft, very rough, of all this stuff. And it might be longer than 2,000 words. Don't focus on the 2,000 words for now. You will need to
Yeah.
focus on this, and you definitely will need to make the stories short enough that they don't explode. But now we have all the pieces. We have the intro, and you know that you can try, and you can try different strategies on how to write it, whether to give some suspense, give them a bad guy, or give them a story that you don't know where it will end, or whatever. Then you have your 5 stories, then you have some kind of revelation, or maybe at the end that is about you, but it's probably obvious at the end of the 5th story that it's about you, because you talk about good ripple, you talk about the other things that you do, and you want to tell them, because this is also an opportunity to advertise what you're doing, obviously,
Yeah.
right? And then you have this bridge, and you tell, oh, you guys, you are the same. You are there as well. And maybe at that point you show the picture. You are like this guy with the exhaust. And then at that point they love you, and they got it. And then you explain them. You tell them, look, all this stuff is structured, and it's 5 steps. And this is the funnel. It's A, B, C, D, E. Explanation, overall explanation of what it is about, and then the 5 activities, or the 5 do's and don'ts for each of the steps.
Yeah.
Then the call to action, and then the final thing that you said at minute, I guess it was 20 minutes in. I don't remember what you said, but you just repeated.
Yeah.
Not focus on saying exactly the same thing that we said, but anyway,
Yeah.
you put the recording.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah,
I like it.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's been super helpful. Yeah. It's funny because like I think I was thinking before, yeah, I'm really struggling to come up with these ideas of stories. Like I'm not sure, like I've got so many stories, but I don't know which ones to pick and how to put it in that order. But this actually has been super helpful, yeah, to put that stories and come up with the right stories, or at least an initial idea of them, and then yeah, have it
And it's
that structure.
cool. Yeah, absolutely. It's not set in stone.
Yeah.
You might even, if you have another story that could be competing, you write it down. And it's 200 words,
Yeah.
300 words. It's just a few paragraphs. And yes. So you have material to work on, and to write a first draft that I sense that it will be much more advanced than what I'm used to see, because people come with a general idea and then it takes really weeks to sort it out. But actually, we
Yeah.
have already 2 weeks, at least, or even 3 weeks of thinking on your side, plus the work that we did together. So I'm very happy. We are at a very good stage.
Nice. Yeah. No, I'm happy to. And thanks, Leonardo, for all your help. Honestly, it's been super, super helpful today.
I love it. Yeah, fantastic.